What if the show that changed American television forever almost never made it past its third pilot? A president secretly ranted about it in the Oval Office. A future Hollywood legend turned down one of its most iconic roles. A toilet flush made broadcast history, and the chairs from its living room ended up in the Smithsonian. All in the Family looked like a simple sitcom about a working-class family in Queens. But behind every argument in that living room was a story stranger and more consequential than anything Archie Bunker ever said from his chair. Here are 15 weird facts about All in the Family 1971 you didn't know. Fact 15. Mickey Rooney predicted Norman Lear would be shot dead. When Norman Lear was developing Archie Bunker, his first choice for the role was Mickey Rooney, one of Hollywood's most experienced and recognized performers. Rooney had been entertaining American audiences since the 1930s and carried the kind of lived-in authenticity that the characters seemed to require. Lear called him to pitch the concept, and the conversation did not go the way he expected. As Lear began describing Archie, explaining that the character would use openly offensive language on primetime network television, Rooney interrupted him before the pitch was finished. He told Lear plainly that they were going to shoot him dead in the streets. He was not speaking metaphorically. Rooney genuinely believed that American audiences in 1968 were not prepared for a character who gave open voice to racist and prejudiced views, even in a comedic context designed to expose those views as absurd. The concern reflected something real about the era. Television sitcoms had operated for decades within a careful set of restrictions, featuring idealized families and deliberately avoiding anything that might generate controversy. The idea of a bigoted character at the center of a primetime comedy seemed professionally reckless to the point of being dangerous. Rooney was not alone in that assessment. Among the weird facts about All in the Family 1971, this one sets up everything that followed with a single prediction. Rooney declined the role. Carroll O'Connor took it instead and turned Archie Bunker into one of the most analyzed characters in the history of American entertainment. Norman Lear lived to be 100 years old. Every part of Rooney's warning turned out to be wrong, but his certainty that the show would destroy everything captures exactly how radical the concept genuinely was in the years before it aired. Before moving ahead, take a quick second to subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for the next story. Fact 14. Harrison Ford turned down Meathead. Before Harrison Ford became Han Solo or Indiana Jones, he was a working actor taking small television roles and doing carpentry between jobs to cover his bills. When Norman Lear was casting the role of Michael Stivic, the liberal son-in-law who would serve as Archie's ideological opposite, Ford's name came up as a candidate. Lear was interested in him for the part that would come to be known by Archie's nickname for the character. Ford turned it down. His stated reason was not about the role itself or about the schedule or the money. He was uncomfortable with the show's central premise and concerned that a sitcom built around a bigoted character could normalize the very attitudes it intended to satirize. Even though Michael was specifically written to challenge and argue against Archie's views in every episode, Ford felt that the show's construction was too risky, regardless of its intentions. Among the weird facts about All in the Family 1971, this one invites an alternate version of television history that is genuinely difficult to visualize. Rob Reiner made the role entirely his own, winning 2 Emmy Awards for his performance and creating a character that feels inseparable from the show's dynamic. Harrison Ford as Meathead is almost impossible to picture now. Ford's decision had no visible effect on his career trajectory. He went on to become one of the highest-grossing actors in film history. Richard Dreyfuss also pursued the part and was passed over in favor of Reiner. Both Dreyfuss and Ford would appear together in American Graffiti just a few years after this, in a film that helped launch both of them toward the careers that followed. The role Ford declined became one of television's most recognized parts. The role he took instead when the right opportunity came along was Han Solo. The decisions that shape careers are not always the ones that look most significant at the time they are made. Fact 13. An Oakland Raiders linebacker almost played the son-in-law. The casting history of All in the Family before it reached CBS involved 2 failed pilots, multiple network rejections, and at least one casting decision that stands as one of the stranger choices in television development history. When ABC rejected Lear's first pilot and gave him a second chance to rework the show, Lear cast Chip Oliver in the role of the liberal son-in-law. Chip Oliver was a linebacker for the Oakland Raiders. He had no acting experience of any meaningful kind. His background was professional football and a countercultural lifestyle that had led him to leave the NFL at various points to live in a commune and work in an organic foods restaurant. He had written a book about his unconventional path through professional sports. None of this constituted preparation for playing a leading role in a television sitcom. Among the weird facts about All in the Family 1971, this casting choice tells you the most about how uncertain and experimental the development process actually was. Lear was working with whatever he had access to, and what he had access to in that moment was a football player with no credits and an unconventional reputation that seemed to fit the countercultural spirit of the character he was trying to cast. ABC rejected the second pilot as well, citing the content and the cast. The network had just canceled a sketch comedy after a single episode due to viewer complaints and was nervous about anything that might generate similar backlash. When CBS eventually picked up the show, Lear recast the younger roles entirely, bringing in Rob Reiner and Sally Struthers. Oliver never acted again. His one and only screen credit exists inside a pilot that was rejected and never broadcast. The role he played became one of the most recognized parts in television history, performed by someone who had never played football for a professional franchise. Fact 12. President Nixon secretly ranted about the show in the Oval Office. In February of 1971, just weeks after All in the Family premiered, President Richard Nixon happened to catch an episode while looking for a baseball game on television. The episode he found was the one that featured the first openly gay character in primetime television history, in which Archie assumes one character is gay, but discovers that his own tough guy drinking buddy is the one who is homosexual. Nixon was not pleased by what he watched. Days after the episode aired, Nixon was in the Oval Office with his chief of staff and his domestic policy chief when he brought up the show. These conversations were being secretly captured by the White House taping system that would later become famous during the Watergate hearings. The recordings eventually became public, and they revealed Nixon ranting at length about the episode, demanding that CBS pull the show from the air, and going on an extended tangent about his belief that homosexuality had been responsible for the collapse of ancient civilizations. Among the weird facts about All in the Family 1971, this one has the most historically layered quality to it. A president using a secret recording system to document his complaints about a sitcom on tapes that would later contribute to his own political destruction, while raging about a show that was using comedy to challenge exactly the kind of thinking he was demonstrating in real time. Nixon seemed confused at points about whether he was watching a movie or a weekly series, asking his aides for clarification. He was also angry that the show presented the conservative character as a fool, while the liberal son-in-law came across as more sympathetic. Norman Lear later said he found it genuinely delightful that the President of the United States had devoted Oval Office time to discussing his show. The recordings stand as an unintentional tribute to the show's impact. All in the Family had been on the air for weeks and had already reached the Oval Office as a topic of genuine presidential concern. Fact 11. Sammy Davis Jr.'s kiss produced the longest laugh in the series. When Sammy Davis Jr. appeared on All in the Family in the second season episode Sammy's Visit, the setup was simple. Archie, working a second job as a cab driver, picks Davis up as a passenger. Davis accidentally leaves his briefcase in the cab and comes to the bunker house to retrieve it. Archie spends the episode trying to be on his best behavior while still managing to say one offensive thing after another, and Davis deflects every moment with charm and precision. The scene that ended the episode was not in the original script. As Davis was preparing to leave and Archie's boss arrived with a camera to take a photograph of Archie with the famous entertainer, Davis turned at the last moment and kissed Archie on the cheek just as the shutter clicked. Carroll O'Connor came up with the idea during filming. When it happened in front of the live studio audience, the response was immediate and enormous. The laughter that followed went on long enough that the production team had to edit it down in the final broadcast to make room for O'Connor's closing line. Director John Rich described the audience reaction as the cast simply going berserk in a way that had not happened in any other episode. Among the weird facts about All in the Family 1971, this one captures the show at its most purely effective. A single unscripted physical gesture produced the longest sustained laugh in the series' entire run. What made the moment work was the specificity of its logic. Archie Bunker, who had spent the entire episode navigating his own prejudices in front of a guest he could not afford to offend, ended up in a photograph capturing a kiss he could never explain to anyone who saw it. The audience understood all of that in the moment it happened, which is why the laughter took as long as it did to stop. The episode is regularly cited as one of the finest single installments in the show's history. The ending that made it iconic was invented on the day it was filmed. Fact 10. The sock and shoe argument was completely improvised. One of the most beloved scenes in the show's entire run appears in the fourth season episode Gloria Sings the Blues. Archie wakes Mike early for a fishing trip and watches him get dressed. He notices that Mike puts on a sock and a shoe on one foot before moving to the other, and he cannot let it pass. What follows is a several-minute argument about the correct way to put on footwear, with each man defending his method using increasingly elaborate logic that spirals into scenarios involving fires and rainstorms. Rob Reiner revealed years later that the scene was not written in any conventional sense. It developed because Carroll O'Connor actually walked into Reiner's dressing room before filming one day and noticed him getting dressed that way in real life. O'Connor was genuinely bothered by it and began lecturing Reiner on the spot. Reiner told the writers what had happened, and they built a scene around it, but the logic of the argument and much of the actual dialogue were worked out in the room rather than on the page. Among the weird facts about All in the Family 1971, this one says the most about where the show's best material often came from. The writing staff was talented and disciplined, but the most resonant moments frequently emerged from something real that happened between people who had spent enough time together to argue about how they tied their shoes. The scene was performed in front of a live studio audience whose genuine laughter can be heard throughout. It was not polished or refined in the way that scripted material gets refined through multiple drafts. It was two men who had developed a real comedic relationship working through an argument that had already happened once, finding the version of it that belonged on television. Fans who have seen the full series rank this scene among the most memorable moments across more than 200 episodes. It came from a wardrobe room encounter that nobody planned to make into anything. Fact 9. Archie's chair cost $8 and then $15,000. The original chairs in the bunker living room were purchased from a Goodwill thrift store in Southern California in 1970 for somewhere between $8 and $10 total. The set designers wanted furniture that looked authentically worn and working class, and what they found at the thrift store was exactly that. The chairs were likely manufactured in the 1940s. Nobody on the production gave them much additional thought once they were placed on the set. They became two of the most recognizable props in television history. Archie's orange-yellow wing chair in particular became a symbol of the character's need to control his own space, the one place in the house that was unambiguously his. The repeated command that anyone sitting in his chair get out of it became one of the show's signature recurring moments. In 1978, Norman Lear believed the show was ending and arranged for both chairs to be donated to the Smithsonian Institution in a ceremony attended by the cast. This was among the first times the museum had acquired popular culture artifacts rather than strictly historical or industrial objects. The chairs went behind plexiglass as permanent exhibits. Among the weird facts about All in the Family 1971, the next part of this story is the one nobody anticipated. CBS renewed the show for a 9th season shortly after the donation ceremony, which meant the production suddenly needed replacement chairs. Because the originals were now in a national museum, exact replicas had to be commissioned. Replicating every worn patch and faded area of furniture that had cost less than $10 required $15,000 to reproduce accurately. The originals remain at the Smithsonian and consistently rank among the museum's most visited exhibits. They were loaned out once for Norman Lear's Kennedy Center Honors Ceremony in 2017. During rehearsal, Rob Reiner attempted to sit in Archie's chair and was immediately told to get up by museum staff who could not allow anyone to sit in artifacts of that value. Fact 8. The first toilet flush in TV history happened on this show. By 1971, American network television had spent decades carefully avoiding any reference to toilets as functional objects. Leave It to Beaver had shown a toilet tank on screen in 1957 only because the plot required hiding a pet alligator inside it, and even then the network insisted that the bowl itself never appear on camera. For over a decade following that careful negotiation, toilets remained essentially invisible and entirely silent on American network television. All in the Family changed that in its very first season with the episode titled Success Story. Archie used the bathroom off-screen, and the audience heard the sound of a toilet flushing. It was the first time that sound had ever been broadcast on American network television. The writers treated it as a comedic tool rather than a one-time boundary crossing. They began using the flush as a recurring sound effect, deploying it the way a percussion instrument gets used in a musical arrangement. Among the weird facts about All in the Family 1971, this one reveals how deliberately the show pushed against the conventions that had governed what television was allowed to sound like for 2 decades. CBS executive William Tankersley objected to the flush being used as what amounted to transitional music between scenes. Norman Lear and his writers held their position. Tankersley's objection lost. The decision was consistent with what Lear was trying to do across the entire series. Real American families used bathrooms. Real American homes had toilets that made sounds. A show committed to depicting working-class life honestly could not pretend that the bathroom on the second floor of the bunker house was a decorative element that nobody ever visited. The flush stayed. Fact 7. Sally Struthers spent $40,000. Trying to quit Sally, Struthers won 2 Emmy Awards for her portrayal of Gloria Bunker Stivic. Off-camera, she spent much of the show's run deeply frustrated with how her character was being written. She described herself in interviews as the 4th banana on the show, a character who existed primarily to react to the 3 main figures around her rather than to carry her own material. Her description of a typical episode's dialogue for Gloria was specific and pointed. 3 rotating lines, one helping to set the table, one asking where Michael was going, and one telling Archie to stop. When writers did not know what to do with Gloria in a given scene, their solution was to send her upstairs to wash her hair. Struthers felt that the older male writers on the show, however talented they were at writing the central conflict between Archie and Michael, simply did not know how to write for a young woman. The frustration built over 5 seasons until Struthers decided she had enough. She hired a lawyer and took her contract to arbitration, hoping to be released from the show so she could pursue other work. The legal fight was serious and prolonged. Among the weird facts about All in the Family. 1971, the cost of this attempt is the most striking detail. By the time the arbitration concluded, Struthers had spent $40,000 in legal fees. That was a significant sum of money in the mid-1970s under any circumstances. She lost. The arbitration ruling required her to return to the show for its remaining seasons. The silver lining was real and unexpected. When she came back for seasons 6 through 8, the writers had apparently absorbed some of the criticism because Gloria finally began receiving storylines that developed her as an actual character. She and Michael had a baby, they moved into the house next door, and her material became more substantive and more feminist in its framing. Struthers later said those final 3 seasons were by far the most satisfying she had experienced on the show. She had spent $40,000 and years of frustration to get there, but the character she had wanted to play finally existed in the end. Fact 6. Every famous Archie line came from Norman Lear's father. All in the Family was not simply adapted from a British sitcom or constructed from imagination. It was drawn in very specific ways from Norman Lear's own childhood, with a father who bore a remarkable resemblance to the character his son would eventually create. Herman Lear, known to the family as H.K. or King Lear, was a salesman with a criminal history who served 3 years in prison when Norman was 9 years old for selling fraudulent bonds. He was also a loud, opinionated man who ran his household with a certainty that his views required no examination. Nearly every catchphrase associated with Archie Bunker came directly from Herman. When he wanted his wife to be quiet, he told her to stifle. He called his own son the laziest white kid he ever saw, which appeared on the show word for word. When Norman protested that his father was insulting an entire group of people just to make a point about his son, Herman told him he was also the dumbest white kid he had ever met. He had his own chair that no one else was permitted to sit in. The word meathead, meaning dead from the neck up, was his invention. Among the weird facts about All in the Family 1971, this one is the most personally revealing about the show's creator. Among the weird facts about All in the Family 1971, this one reframes the show's entire emotional architecture. Lear was not writing a satirical caricature of American bigotry from the outside. He was writing his father. Lear consistently emphasized in interviews that he loved Herman deeply, despite everything, and could not make him into a simple villain. The complexity of that feeling, a son who recognized his father's flaws clearly and loved him completely at the same time, became the emotional engine that made Archie Bunker simultaneously infuriating and recognizable to millions of viewers. The audience did not just see a bigot, they saw someone they knew. That quality came from a real relationship, the chair, the phrases, the stubbornness, the love underneath the argument. All of it was already in the room before Lear sat down to write a single scene. Fact 5. Gene Stapleton turned down. Willy Wonka. In 1971, while All in the Family was establishing itself during its first season, Gene Stapleton received an offer from the producers of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. They wanted her for the role of Mrs. TV, the mother of the television-obsessed boy who ends up on the tour of Wonka's factory. For many actresses at that point in their careers, an opportunity in a major studio film based on a beloved children's book would have been difficult to decline. Stapleton declined without extended deliberation. Her reason was simple. She was content playing Edith Bunker, and did not want to divide her attention or risk disrupting the work she was doing on what she recognized as something genuinely unusual in television. She had spent years in theater and in supporting television roles before landing the part of Edith, and she understood clearly that this character represented something different from anything she had been offered before. Among the weird facts about All in the Family 1971, this one carries the most clearly vindicated outcome. The role in Willy Wonka went to Nora Denny, and the film became a beloved classic, but primarily because of Gene Wilder's central performance. Mrs. TV is a minor supporting part remembered by most viewers only vaguely, if at all. Edith Bunker is one of the most recognized characters in American television history. Stapleton won 3 Emmy Awards for the role and spent 8 years developing a character whose sweetness and underlying wisdom made her the emotional center of a show that might otherwise have become too dark without her. The decision to stay proved to be the right one by every available measure. She passed on a small part in a film that became a classic to hold on to a part in a show that became something larger. Both choices made sense in 1971. Only one of them turned out to be her legacy. Fact 4. The theme song had to be re-recorded because nobody could understand it. The opening theme, "Those Were the Days," became one of the most recognizable television theme songs of the 1970s, with Carol O'Connor and Gene Stapleton sitting at a piano and singing about a past that Archie remembered with a nostalgia that the show quietly undercut at every turn. The song worked. But for its first 2 seasons, one specific line in it was generating letters and phone calls to CBS from viewers who could not understand what Edith was singing. The line referenced the LaSalle, a mid-priced automobile manufactured by General Motors and discontinued in 1940. By 1971, many viewers had never heard of the car. That alone created some confusion. The larger problem was that Stapleton's delivery of the word in the original recording was blurred enough by her character's vocal quality that it did not land clearly. Viewers were writing in with their best guesses about what she was saying, most of which involved other cars entirely. The network and producers received enough complaints and inquiries that action was taken. Among the weird facts about All in the Family 1971, this is the most easily overlooked because it involves a handful of syllables in a song that most viewers assumed had always sounded exactly the way it did. When Season 3 began, the opening credits were refilmed and Stapleton re-recorded the song with specific attention paid to that line. She slowed down, enunciated carefully, and made sure the word came through without ambiguity. The confusion stopped. Viewers could finally hear that the Bunkers were remembering their old LaSalle. The corrected version became the one associated with the show across the remainder of its run. A single blurred word in a theme song generated enough correspondence that a network sitcom had to reshoot its opening sequence. That is a specific kind of audience engagement that is difficult to imagine today. Fact 3. The show required 3 pilots and 2 network rejections. All in the Family did not reach CBS by a straightforward path. Norman Lear secured the rights to adapt the British sitcom Till Death Us Do Part in 1968, developed a pilot script, and shot it in New York with Carol O'Connor and Gene Stapleton already in place as Archie and Edith, whose surname at that stage was Justice rather than Bunker. The younger roles were played by actors who would not survive the development process. ABC screened the first pilot and rejected it. Their stated complaint was that the central couple lacked chemistry with the younger actors. They were interested enough in the concept to give Lear a second attempt. For the second pilot, Lear retooled the script, retitled the show Those Were the Days, and recast the younger roles. Among the weird facts about All in the Family 1971, this is where the Raiders linebacker enters the story, because the son-in-law in that second pilot was played by Chip Oliver, a professional football player with no acting credits. ABC rejected the second pilot as well. The network had just canceled a sketch comedy after a single episode due to viewer complaints about edgy content and had become deeply cautious about anything that might generate similar backlash. The timing worked against Lear in a specific and unfortunate way. The rejection had less to do with the quality of what he had produced than with the climate in which the network was operating. CBS entered the picture when Robert Wood became network president and began actively looking for socially relevant programming to replace the rural comedies he was clearing from the schedule. A CBS executive watched one of the rejected pilots and described it in terms that captured both his alarm and his recognition that it was something genuinely different. CBS picked the show up. Lear recast the younger roles one final time with Sally Struthers and Rob Reiner, and the version that changed American television went into production. 3 pilots, 2 networks that said no, 1 show that ended up at the Smithsonian. Fact 2. Norman Lear offered to pay CBS to keep his episodes intact. As All in the Family grew into one of the highest-rated shows on television, CBS began looking at ways to monetize that audience more aggressively. The network decided to cut 3 minutes from each episode to create space for additional advertising. For a half-hour sitcom, 3 minutes is a meaningful reduction, representing roughly 10% of the total running time and the loss of character moments, comedic beats, or dialogue that the writers had considered essential to the episode's structure. Norman Lear was protective of his material to a degree that most producers were not in a position to act on. He did not simply object or negotiate. He made CBS an offer that was unusual enough that it has been discussed in accounts of the show for decades afterward. He volunteered to personally pay the network to compensate for the advertising revenue they would lose if they restored those 3 minutes to each episode. Among the weird facts about All in the Family 1971, this one reveals the most about how Lear understood the relationship between commerce and craft on a successful television series. He had made enough money from the show's success that the offer was financially plausible rather than symbolic. He was prepared to actually write the check. CBS turned him down. The additional advertising revenue was more valuable to the network than the integrity of the episode running times, regardless of who was offering to offset the difference. The episodes remained at their shortened length, and the writers had to adjust their work to fit the tighter constraint. The offer itself stands as one of the more striking examples of a creator's commitment to their work in the history of American television. Lear did not just argue for his show, he offered to buy back the minutes that were being taken from it, and the network said no. Fact 1. The chairs from the living room are in the Smithsonian. The chairs that sat in the bunker living room for 8 seasons started their lives at a Goodwill thrift store in Southern California, purchased for somewhere between $8 and $10 total, because the set designers wanted furniture that looked authentically worn and working class. They were placed on the set and functioned as props. Nobody involved in that transaction was thinking about museum acquisition. In 1978, believing the show was concluding after its 8th season, Norman Lear arranged for the chairs to be formally donated to the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of History and Technology. The donation ceremony was attended by the cast and represented one of the museum's first significant acquisitions in the area of popular culture rather than industrial or strictly historical artifacts. Curator Dwight Blocker Bowers later compared their significance to chairs associated with major moments in American political history, arguing that the bunker living room had been the site of debates about the social and political questions that defined the 1970s in ways that made the furniture genuinely documentary in nature. Among the weird facts about All in the Family 1971, this one contains the most unexpected sequel. CBS renewed the show for a 9th season shortly after the chairs had been installed behind plexiglass at the museum. the production needed replacements. Because the originals were now formally protected national artifacts, exact duplicates had to be commissioned from scratch. Reproducing every worn surface and faded patch of thrift store furniture that had cost under $10 required $15,000 in work. The originals remained at the Smithsonian and have been among the museum's most visited exhibits for decades. They left the building once, when they were used as set decoration for Norman Lear's Kennedy Center Honors Ceremony in 2017. During rehearsal for that event, Rob Reiner sat down in Archie's chair and was immediately told by museum staff to get up. The instruction was delivered with the same energy the line had always carried on the show, and Reiner got out of the chair. 2 pieces of second-hand furniture purchased for less than $10 total are now permanent national artifacts. The show that made them famous changed American television. The chairs are what the Smithsonian kept. All in the Family spent 8 seasons putting uncomfortable truths in front of an American audience that had never seen anything like it on primetime television. The stories behind those seasons turned out to be just as revealing as anything that happened in the bunker living room. Which of these facts surprised you most? Tell us in the comments below. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss one.